My name is Michael and I want to tell you a story that completely turned my world upside down. It's a story about trust, betrayal, and how sometimes what appears to be a disaster can actually be the beginning of something better. This is my account of how I discovered what I thought was my wife's affair, only to uncover a truth far more complex and disturbing than I could have ever imagined. Sarah and I met 5 years ago at the technology company where we both worked. I was a systems administrator, spending my days troubleshooting servers and maintaining network infrastructure. She had just been hired as our new HR manager, fresh out of college with a degree in psychology and dreams of eventually becoming a licensed therapist. I remember the first day she walked into our office. Sarah had this warm, genuine smile that immediately put people at ease, and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to really see you when she talked to you. She was naturally beautiful in an understated way, shoulder-length auburn hair, a sprinkle of freckles across her nose, and a laugh that could brighten even the most stressful workday. Our romance developed slowly and naturally. It started with casual conversations during lunch breaks in the company cafeteria. Sarah would tell me about her plans to eventually go back to school for her master's degree in clinical psychology, and I would share my dreams of starting my own IT consulting business. We discovered we both loved hiking, had similar tastes in movies, and shared the same dry sense of humor. After months of what could generously be called workplace flirting, I finally worked up the courage to ask her out. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, but the conversation flowed effortlessly for hours. Sarah had this way of making me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world, asking thoughtful questions about my work, my family, my goals for the future. What I loved most about Sarah from the beginning was her genuine interest in people. She wasn't just making small talk, she really wanted to understand what made people tick, what their fears and dreams were, how she could help them feel heard and valued. It was clear she was born to be a therapist. We were exclusive within 3 months and moved in together after dating for a year. Sarah had a small apartment across town, but we spent most of our time at my place anyway, so it made sense to combine our lives officially. Living with Sarah was everything I had hoped it would be. She brought warmth and organization to my somewhat chaotic bachelor lifestyle. I would come home from work to find her cooking dinner while studying for her evening psychology classes, textbooks spread across the kitchen counter, our cat Whiskers weaving between her feet. We got married after 2 years together in a small ceremony at a local park pavilion. Neither of us had much family. Sarah's parents had died in a car accident when she was in college, and my parents lived across the country. But we were surrounded by close friends and colleagues who had watched our relationship blossom. I remember looking at Sarah as she said her vows, tears streaming down her face as she promised to love me through whatever life might bring us, and thinking that I was the luckiest man alive. She chose me, out of all the people in the world, to build a life with. The first 3 years of our marriage were like an extended honeymoon. We bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood, adopted a rescue dog named Buddy, and settled into comfortable routines. Sarah continued working at the company while taking evening classes toward her master's degree. I finally launched my IT consulting business, working from our converted garage office. Everything seemed to be falling into place exactly as we had planned. We talked about starting a family once Sarah finished her degree and got established in her therapy practice. We made lists of names we liked, discussed what kind of parents we wanted to be, planned family vacations we would take with our future children. But as I would soon learn, sometimes the most perfect-seeming lives can hide the deepest struggles. The changes in Sarah began about a year ago, so gradually that I didn't notice them at first. Looking back now, I can see the pattern, but at the time each individual change seemed insignificant or easily explained. It started with Sarah's sleep patterns. She had always been an excellent sleeper. The kind of person who could fall asleep within minutes of her head hitting the pillow and sleep soundly until morning. But suddenly she was tossing and turning at night, waking up multiple times, sometimes getting up to pace around the house. When I asked her about it, she said she was stressed about her thesis project for graduate school. She was researching anxiety disorders and their treatment, which required her to read a lot of heavy material about trauma and mental health struggles. It made sense that this might be affecting her sleep. Then I noticed changes in her eating habits. Sarah had always had a healthy appetite and enjoyed cooking elaborate meals for us to share. But she started picking at her food, claiming she wasn't hungry, or eating only small salads for dinner. When I expressed concern, she said she was trying to eat healthier and lose a few pounds. Her behavior at social gatherings changed too. Sarah had always been the life of the party. The person who remembered everyone's names, asked about their kids, made sure no one felt left out of conversations. But at our friends' barbecues and dinner parties, she started seeming withdrawn and anxious, staying close to my side instead of mingling freely. "Are you feeling okay?" I would ask during the car ride home. "Just tired," she would reply, but I could see tension in her shoulders, hear a tightness in her voice that hadn't been there before. The most concerning change was in our physical intimacy. Sarah had always been affectionate, quick to hug me when I got home from work, reaching for my hand while we watched TV, initiating romantic encounters regularly. But she became increasingly distant, flinching slightly when I touched her unexpectedly, declining my advances with excuses about being too tired or too stressed. I tried to be understanding. Graduate school was demanding, her thesis project was challenging, and she was still working full-time. It made sense that she might be feeling overwhelmed and not in the mood for physical intimacy. But deep down I was starting to worry that something more serious was wrong. About 8 months ago, Sarah's schedule became increasingly erratic. She had always been very organized and predictable, leaving for work at the same time each morning, attending classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, maintaining consistent routines. But suddenly she was staying late at work more often, claiming there were urgent HR issues to handle or special projects that required extra hours. She started attending additional study groups and research meetings that weren't on her original class schedule. "Dr. Peterson assigned us to a special advanced seminar," she explained when I questioned the new commitments. "It's only for students who are excelling in their thesis work." I was proud of her academic success, but I missed our evening routines together. Dinner conversations became rushed affairs before she hurried off to some commitment or another. Our weekend hiking trips became rare, replaced by Sarah's need to work on research or meet with study groups. Then came the phone behavior that really set off alarm bells. Sarah had never been secretive about her phone calls or text messages. We had shared passwords, left our devices lying around casually, occasionally answered each other's phones if the other person was in the shower or cooking. But Sarah suddenly became very protective of her phone. She started taking it with her everywhere, to the bathroom, to the kitchen while cooking, even to bed where she would place it under her pillow, claiming she was worried about missing important calls from professors or work. When notifications came in, she would quickly grab the phone and check the messages herself, never sharing what they were about. If I walked into a room while she was on a phone call, she would quickly end the conversation or switch to discussing mundane topics like class schedules or work meetings. "Who was that?" I would ask casually. "Just someone from my study group asking about the assignment," she would reply, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. The most suspicious change was in Sarah's appearance and demeanor. She started dressing differently, more carefully, with newer clothes that I didn't remember her buying. She began wearing makeup on days when she didn't have work or classes, styling her hair differently, using perfume that I didn't recognize. When I complimented her on looking especially beautiful, she would seem pleased but also nervous, as if my attention made her uncomfortable rather than happy. "You seem different lately," I told her one evening as she was getting ready to leave for another mysterious commitment. "Different how?" she asked, pausing and applying lipstick. "I don't know. More energetic, I guess. But also more anxious." "I'm just excited about my research project," she said. And yes, a little stressed about getting everything done. But there was something in her tone, something in the way she avoided my reflection in the mirror, that made me feel like she wasn't telling me the complete truth. The incident that shattered my world happened on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I had finished a client consultation early and decided to surprise Sarah by picking up lunch from her favorite Thai restaurant and bringing it to her workplace. When I arrived at the office building, I was told by the receptionist that Sarah had left for the day at noon, saying she had a doctor's appointment. This was strange, since Sarah always told me about her medical appointments, and she hadn't mentioned anything that morning. I tried calling her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I decided to drive home, thinking maybe she had come back from her appointment and was working from home. As I turned onto our street, I saw an unfamiliar black BMW sedan parked in front of our house. Through the windshield, I could see Sarah sitting in the passenger seat, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with a man I didn't recognize. I parked across the street and watched, my heart beginning to pound. The man appeared to be in his mid-30s, well-dressed in an expensive suit, with dark hair and an authoritative demeanor. He was gesturing as he spoke, and Sarah was listening intently, nodding frequently. After about 10 minutes, Sarah leaned over and hugged the man. Not a casual friendly hug, but a lingering embrace that spoke of intimacy and familiarity. Then she got out of the car and walked to our front door while the BMW drove away. I waited several minutes before going inside, trying to compose myself and figure out what I had witnessed. When I entered the house, Sarah was in the kitchen, unpacking groceries as if she had just returned from a routine errand. "Hi, honey," she said brightly. "You're home early." "Yeah, my afternoon meeting got canceled," I replied, studying her face for signs of deception. "How was your doctor's appointment?" "Fine," she said without hesitation. "Just a routine checkup." "What doctor was it with?" I asked, testing her story. "Dr. Williams, my gynecologist," she replied smoothly. "Everything looks normal." But I knew she was lying. There had been no doctor's appointment, no routine checkup. She had been with that man in the BMW, and she was covering it up with practiced ease. That night, lying in bed listening to Sarah's breathing beside me, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out who that man was and what my wife was hiding from me. The next morning, after Sarah left for work, I began my investigation. I started by checking our joint bank account and credit card statements online, looking for any unusual charges or withdrawals that might give me clues about Sarah's secret activities. What I found was disturbing but not immediately incriminating. There were several charges at upscale restaurants during times when Sarah claimed to be at class or work. There were payments to a parking garage downtown that we never used. Most concerning were several large cash withdrawals, unusual for Sarah, who typically used cards for everything. I also found charges for new clothes at department stores I knew Sarah didn't usually shop at, and payments to a hair salon that wasn't her regular stylist. These discoveries painted a picture of someone living a double life, but I still didn't have proof of what that life entailed. My next step was to try to gather more information about the man in the BMW. I spent several afternoons parked near our house during times when I knew Sarah would be returning from her mysterious appointments, hoping to see him again. On the third day I got lucky. The BMW pulled up at the same time as before, and I was able to get a clear photo of the license plate with my phone camera. I also managed to take several pictures of the man himself as he and Sarah said goodbye. With the license plate number, I hired a private investigator, something I never thought I would do in my lifetime. Detective James Rodriguez came highly recommended and specialized in marital investigations. "I understand how difficult this must be for you," Detective Rodriguez said during our initial meeting in his modest office. "Most people hope they're wrong when they come to see me. Unfortunately, when someone has already observed multiple suspicious behaviors, their instincts are usually correct." I gave Detective Rodriguez all the information I had gathered, the photos, the license plate number, the financial records, and a timeline of Sarah's changed behaviors. He explained that he would conduct surveillance for 1 week, documenting Sarah's activities and identifying the man she had been meeting with. The waiting period was torture. Every interaction with Sarah felt loaded with hidden meaning. When she kissed me goodbye in the morning, I wondered if she was thinking about another man. When she came home late, I searched her face for signs of guilt or satisfaction. When she used her phone, I wondered who she was texting. I found myself becoming paranoid and suspicious about everything. If Sarah seemed happy, I wondered if it was because of time spent with her lover. If she seemed distracted, I assumed she was thinking about him. I started questioning every story she told me, analyzing every expression for signs of deception. Detective Rodriguez called me exactly 1 week after I had hired him. "Mr. Johnson, I have completed my investigation and have significant findings to share with you. Could you come to my office this afternoon?" Detective Rodriguez's office felt like the setting for the end of my marriage as I knew it. He had prepared a comprehensive report with photographs, documents, and a detailed timeline of Sarah's activities during the week he had been following her. "Before I show you what we've found," Detective Rodriguez said gently, "I want you to know that this information may be difficult to process. Take your time with each piece of evidence, and please ask questions if anything is unclear." The first photograph showed Sarah and the man from the BMW entering an upscale hotel in downtown. They were walking close together, the man's hand on Sarah's lower back in a gesture that seemed intimate and possessive. The second photo was taken through the hotel restaurant window. Sarah and the man were seated at a corner table, leaning toward each other in intense conversation. Sarah's body language was animated and engaged in a way I hadn't seen from her in months. The third photograph showed them embracing in the hotel parking garage. It was clearly more than a friendly hug. Sarah's arms were wrapped around his neck, and the duration and intensity of the embrace left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. There were more photos documenting multiple meetings over the course of the week, lunches at expensive restaurants, walks in secluded parks, and several visits to the downtown hotel. "Based on our investigation," Detective Rodriguez explained, "your wife has been meeting with this man approximately 3 times per week for at least the past month that we observed. The meetings typically occur during afternoon hours when you're at work, or during times when she claims to be attending classes or work functions. Detective Rodriguez had also identified the man. His name was Dr. Marcus Thompson, age 37, a licensed clinical psychologist with a private practice in the downtown area. He specialized in anxiety and trauma therapy and had several published research papers in professional journals. Dr. Thompson? I repeated, confused. Is he treating Sarah as a patient? That's what makes this case particularly concerning, Detective Rodriguez said gravely. If Dr. Thompson is indeed providing therapy to your wife, then what we've documented represents a serious breach of professional ethics. Therapists are strictly prohibited from having romantic or sexual relationships with their patients. The detective explained that he had done some background research on Dr. Thompson. He had been divorced twice, both times amid allegations of inappropriate relationships with clients. However, he had managed to maintain his professional license and continue practicing. This pattern suggests that Dr. Thompson may be a predatory therapist who exploits vulnerable patients, Detective Rodriguez said. If that's the case, your wife may be a victim of manipulation rather than a willing participant in an affair. This possibility had never occurred to me. I had been so focused on feeling betrayed by Sarah that I hadn't considered she might be the one being victimized. What should I do? I asked. I recommend confronting your wife directly but with compassion, Detective Rodriguez advised. If she is indeed being manipulated by an unethical therapist, she's going to need your support, not your anger. I drove home from Detective Rodriguez's office in a state of emotional turmoil. Part of me was still hurt and angry about Sarah's deception, but another part was beginning to worry that she was being taken advantage of by someone in a position of power and trust. Sarah was in the kitchen when I arrived home, preparing dinner while studying from one of her textbooks. She looked up and smiled when I walked in, but I could see the tension around her eyes that had become so familiar over the past months. "Hi, honey. How was your day?" she asked, trying to sound casual and normal. "We need to talk," I said, sitting down at the kitchen table. Sarah immediately stopped what she was doing. Something in my tone must have alerted her that this was serious. "I know about Dr. Thompson," I said quietly. The color drained from Sarah's face instantly. She gripped the edge of the counter for support and stared at me with wide, frightened eyes. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "I hired a private investigator last week," I told her. "But I've suspected something was wrong for months." Sarah sank into the chair across from me, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "Michael, I can explain," she said. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle despite the pain and confusion I was feeling. What Sarah told me next was a story I could never have imagined, one that revealed months of psychological manipulation and abuse disguised as professional treatment. Sarah began her story by telling me about something that had happened 6 months earlier, something she had been too ashamed and frightened to share with me. "Do you remember that day in September when I came home early from work saying I felt sick?" she asked. I nodded. She had been pale and shaky, claiming to have a stomach bug. She spent the rest of the day in bed and I had brought her soup and tea, assuming she was just fighting off something contagious. "I wasn't sick," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "I had my first panic attack." She explained that she had been in the middle of conducting an employee review when suddenly her heart started racing uncontrollably. She couldn't catch her breath, felt dizzy and nauseous, and was convinced she was having a heart attack or dying. "I was so scared, Michael. I didn't know what was happening to me. I made an excuse to end the meeting and drove home, but I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, hurt that she had suffered through something so frightening alone. "Because I was embarrassed," Sarah said, crying harder now. "You always seem so strong and confident. I was afraid you would think I was weak or crazy." Over the following weeks, Sarah had experienced several more panic attacks. They would come out of nowhere, while she was grocery shopping, during staff meetings at work, even while we were watching TV at home. She became afraid to leave the house alone, afraid to be in crowded places, afraid that another attack would strike at any moment. "I started making excuses to avoid social situations," Sarah explained. "Remember how I kept saying I was too tired to go to dinner parties or movie nights with friends? I wasn't tired, I was terrified of having a panic attack in public." Sarah had done research online and recognized that she was dealing with panic disorder and agoraphobia. She knew she needed professional help, but she was terrified of admitting to me that she was struggling with mental health issues. "I was afraid you would see me differently," she said. "Afraid you would think less of me or that I wasn't the strong, capable woman you married." Instead of talking to me about her struggles, Sarah had found Dr. Thompson through an online directory of therapists. His profile listed him as specializing in anxiety disorders, panic attacks, and trauma recovery. The reviews from former patients were glowing. The first few sessions seemed normal, Sarah explained. We met in his office, talked about my symptoms, and he taught me some breathing techniques. He was very understanding and professional. Dr. Thompson had diagnosed Sarah with panic disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. He explained that her symptoms were common and treatable, but that traditional therapy might not be enough. He recommended what he called experiential therapy, treatment that involved real-world exposure to anxiety-provoking situations with his guidance. He said that office-based talk therapy only went so far, Sarah continued. He convinced me that to really overcome my fears, I needed to practice being in social situations, learning to trust people, and rebuilding my confidence in intimate settings. Dr. Thompson had suggested they begin meeting outside his office, first at coffee shops and restaurants, then in other social settings. He explained this as graduated exposure therapy, designed to help Sarah become comfortable in various social environments while having the security of her therapist nearby. At first it actually seemed to help, Sarah said. I felt less anxious when I was with him because I knew he was there if I had a panic attack. He was teaching me coping strategies and helping me feel safe in public places again. But gradually, Dr. Thompson began pushing the boundaries of appropriate therapeutic behavior. He started saying that my anxiety was rooted in intimacy issues, Sarah explained. He said that I was afraid of being vulnerable and trusting people completely, and that this was contributing to my panic attacks. Dr. Thompson began incorporating physical contact into their sessions. First, it was hand-holding during breathing exercises, then brief hugs at the end of sessions. Eventually, he convinced Sarah that she needed to practice intimate physical contact in order to overcome her fear of vulnerability. He made it sound so clinical and professional, Sarah said. He would explain the psychological theory behind everything, cite research studies, use technical terminology. He convinced me that what we were doing was a legitimate form of therapy. The hotel meetings had begun 2 months earlier. Dr. Thompson explained that Sarah needed to practice being in private, intimate settings without experiencing anxiety. He described their time together as trust-building exercises and intimacy desensitization therapy. We would sit on the bed and he would have me practice relaxation techniques, Sarah said, her voice filled with shame. He would hold me while I did breathing exercises. He said physical comfort from a trusted figure was essential for overcoming trauma-based anxiety. And the kissing? I asked, though I dreaded hearing the answer. Sarah's face crumpled. He said that was part of rebuilding my capacity for intimacy. He claimed that my anxiety was preventing me from being fully present in our marriage, and that practicing intimate contact with him in a safe, therapeutic environment would help me be a better wife to you. As Sarah continued her story, I began to understand the sophisticated psychological manipulation that Dr. Thompson had employed. He had taken advantage of her vulnerability, her trust in his professional credentials, and her fear of losing me to convince her that his inappropriate behavior was actually helping her. He always had explanations for everything, Sarah said. When I felt uncomfortable about the physical contact, he would say that discomfort was just my anxiety talking, and that working through it was part of the healing process. Dr. Thompson had isolated Sarah from her support systems by convincing her that others wouldn't understand her advanced therapeutic techniques. He told her that most people, including other therapists, weren't educated enough about cutting-edge anxiety treatments to appreciate what they were doing. He said that if I told you or anyone else about our sessions, they would interfere with my treatment and cause my anxiety to worsen, Sarah explained. He made me believe that keeping our therapy secret was essential for my mental health. The financial aspects of Sarah's deception also made sense now. Dr. Thompson charged premium rates for his specialized services and required payment in cash to maintain therapeutic confidentiality. The expensive restaurant meetings were billed as environmental therapy sessions, and Sarah felt obligated to dress nicely for these public sessions to practice presenting confidence despite internal anxiety. Last week he told me that we needed to move to the next phase of treatment, Sarah said, her voice becoming very quiet. He said that to fully overcome my intimacy issues, we would need to be physically intimate. This was when Sarah had finally begun to suspect that something was wrong with Dr. Thompson's methods. I asked him to show me research studies about this type of therapy, she said. He became defensive and told me that questioning his professional judgment was a sign that my anxiety was worsening. But something inside me knew that what he was suggesting wasn't right. Sarah had spent the past week doing her own research about panic disorder treatment and ethical guidelines for therapists. She discovered that everything Dr. Thompson had done with her violated professional standards and that his therapeutic techniques weren't recognized by any legitimate psychological organizations. I realized he had been using my mental health struggles to manipulate me into an inappropriate relationship, Sarah said. But I was terrified to stop seeing him because I was afraid my panic attacks would come back. And I was terrified to tell you because I thought you would blame me for letting it happen. As Sarah finished her story, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything I had learned. My wife hadn't been having an affair. She had been the victim of a predatory therapist who had exploited her mental health crisis for his own gratification. The anger I felt toward Sarah for deceiving me was now redirected toward Dr. Thompson, who had manipulated a vulnerable woman seeking help for legitimate mental health issues. The betrayal I had felt was real, but it wasn't Sarah who had betrayed me. It was a professional who had violated his ethical obligations and taken advantage of someone in distress. Sarah, I said finally, I need you to understand something. None of this was your fault. Dr. Thompson took advantage of your vulnerability and your trust. What he did to you was wrong and it was illegal. But I should have known better, Sarah said, still crying. I should have researched his methods. I should have gotten a second opinion. I should have told you what was happening. You were dealing with severe anxiety and panic attacks, I replied. You were in crisis and you trusted someone who was supposed to help you. He manipulated your mental state and your fear of losing me to convince you to do things that felt wrong to you. I reached across the table and took Sarah's hands in mine. I'm not angry with you, I said. I'm angry with him. And I'm sorry that you felt like you couldn't tell me about your panic attacks. We're supposed to be a team, and I failed you by not creating an environment where you felt safe sharing your struggles with me. That night Sarah and I talked until dawn. She told me about every session with Dr. Thompson, every manipulation tactic he had used, every boundary he had crossed. I listened without judgment, asking questions only to better understand what had happened to her. We decided immediately that Sarah would cease all contact with Dr. Thompson. We also agreed that we needed to report his behavior to the state licensing board and consider filing criminal charges for sexual assault and fraud. But what if my panic attacks come back? Sarah asked, voicing her biggest fear. Then we'll deal with them together, I told her. We'll find you a legitimate therapist, a female therapist who specializes in anxiety disorders and has impeccable credentials. And we'll research her thoroughly before you start treatment. The next morning, I called Detective Rodriguez and shared what Sarah had told me. He was not surprised by the revelations. Unfortunately, this fits a pattern we've seen with Dr. Thompson, he said. We've had 3 other women come forward with similar stories over the past 2 years. The problem is that these cases are difficult to prosecute because the victims were initially willing participants, even though their consent was obtained through manipulation. Detective Rodriguez connected us with a lawyer who specialized in professional misconduct cases. Attorney Jennifer Walsh explained that while criminal prosecution would be challenging, we had strong grounds for a civil lawsuit and professional disciplinary action. The state licensing board takes these cases very seriously, Attorney Walsh explained. Even if we can't get a criminal conviction, we can likely get his license revoked and prevent him from victimizing other women. While we were building our case against Dr. Thompson, our immediate priority was finding Sarah legitimate help for her anxiety issues. We researched female therapists who specialized in panic disorder and trauma recovery, checking their credentials, reading reviews, and verifying their licensing status. Dr. Rebecca Martinez came highly recommended from multiple sources. She had over 15 years of experience treating anxiety disorders, was affiliated with the local medical school, and had published research on ethical therapy practices. Most importantly, she was willing to include me in Sarah's treatment process as a supportive partner. What happened to you represents a serious violation of therapeutic ethics, Dr. Martinez told Sarah during their first session. Dr. Thompson exploited your vulnerability and used your legitimate need for help to manipulate you into an inappropriate relationship. This was not therapy, it was abuse disguised as treatment. Dr. Martinez explained that Sarah's panic attacks were completely treatable through legitimate therapeutic methods that would never involve physical intimacy or secretive meetings. She outlined a treatment plan that included cognitive behavioral therapy, medication consultation if needed, and gradual exposure therapy conducted in appropriate clinical settings. Real exposure therapy for panic disorder involves gradually confronting anxiety-provoking situations in a controlled, safe environment, Dr. Martinez explained to both of us. It never involves romantic or sexual contact with the therapist, and it's never conducted in secret. Legitimate therapy is transparent, professional, and designed to empower the patient. Our case against Dr. Thompson was complicated but ultimately successful. 3 other women came forward with similar stories once news of our complaint became public. The pattern that emerged was disturbing but consistent. Dr. Thompson targeted women experiencing anxiety or depression, gained their trust through initially legitimate therapy sessions, then gradually manipulated them into inappropriate relationships by disguising his sexual advances as therapeutic interventions. The state licensing board revoked Dr. Thompson's license to practice psychology after a lengthy investigation. He was also fined and required to undergo his own psychological evaluation and treatment. While we couldn't secure a criminal conviction, the civil lawsuit resulted in a significant financial settlement that helped cover Sarah's legitimate therapy costs and compensated her for the trauma she had experienced. More importantly, Dr. Thompson was prohibited from ever practicing therapy again in our state, and his case was reported to national databases to prevent him from obtaining licenses elsewhere. Justice doesn't always look the way we expect it to, Attorney Walsh told us after the settlement was finalized. But Dr. Thompson can never legally practice therapy again, and your willingness to come forward has protected other women from experiencing what Sarah went through. Sarah's recovery from both her panic disorder and the trauma of Dr. Thompson's manipulation was a gradual process that took several months. Dr. Martinez used evidence-based treatments that helped Sarah understand and manage her anxiety without compromising her dignity or safety. The panic attacks became less frequent and less severe as Sarah learned proper coping techniques. More importantly, she regained confidence in her ability to seek help appropriately and trust her own instincts about what felt right and wrong. Our marriage also required healing. While I didn't blame Sarah for being manipulated, we both had to work through the impact of the deception and secrecy that had characterized the past several months. We attended couples counseling sessions with Dr. Martinez to improve our communication and rebuild the trust that had been damaged. "I need you to promise me something," I told Sarah during one of our counseling sessions. "If you're ever struggling with anything, mental health, work stress, family issues, anything, I want you to tell me. Even if you think I won't understand or that it will burden me. We're supposed to be partners in everything." "I promise," Sarah said. "But I need something from you too. I need you to promise that you'll try to understand and support me, even when I'm dealing with things that seem irrational or frightening to you. I need to know that you won't think less of me for having mental health struggles." "I promise," I replied. "Your mental health is part of your overall health, just like your physical health. I would never judge you for having diabetes or a broken bone, and I won't judge you for having anxiety or depression." One of the most positive outcomes of our traumatic experience was that it gave Sarah a new sense of purpose in her career. She changed her graduate school focus from general clinical psychology to specializing in professional ethics and trauma recovery for victims of therapeutic abuse. "I want to help other women who have been through what I experienced," Sarah told me as she was applying for a specialized internship program. "I want to educate people about what legitimate therapy looks like so they can protect themselves from predatory therapists." Sarah began speaking at professional conferences about therapeutic ethics and patient protection. She also volunteered with organizations that supported victims of professional abuse and helped develop educational materials about recognizing and reporting unethical therapist behavior. "Going through this experience was horrible," Sarah said during one of her presentations, "but if sharing my story can prevent even one other woman from being victimized, then something positive will have come from it." Today, 2 years after discovering what I initially believed was Sarah's affair, our marriage is stronger than it has ever been. We've learned to communicate more openly about our fears, insecurities, and struggles. We've developed systems for supporting each other through difficult times without judgment or shame. Sarah successfully completed her master's degree and is now working as a licensed therapist specializing in anxiety disorders and trauma recovery. She uses her own experience to help clients understand the difference between legitimate treatment and manipulation, and she advocates for stronger professional oversight in the mental health field. I've learned to be more attuned to signs that Sarah might be struggling, and she's learned to share her challenges with me before they become overwhelming. We attend regular check-ins with Dr. Martinez to maintain our communication skills and address any issues before they become major problems. Most importantly, we've both learned that trauma and crisis can either destroy a relationship or make it stronger, depending on how the couple chooses to respond. We chose to respond with compassion, understanding, and a commitment to healing together rather than apart. This experience taught us several crucial lessons that I want to share with others who might be facing similar situations. First, if you suspect your partner is having an affair, consider the possibility that they might be the victim of manipulation or abuse rather than a willing participant in betrayal. Approach the situation with curiosity and compassion rather than immediate anger and accusations. The truth may be far more complex than what appears on the surface. Second, mental health struggles should never be hidden from your partner out of shame or fear. Sarah's decision to conceal her panic attacks made her vulnerable to Dr. Thompson's manipulation and created the conditions for our marital crisis. Open communication about mental health challenges is essential for a healthy relationship. Third, be extremely cautious when seeking therapy or counseling. Research any mental health professional thoroughly, verify their credentials and licensing status, and be aware of warning signs of unethical behavior. Legitimate therapy should never involve secrecy, inappropriate physical contact, or isolation from your support systems. Fourth, trust your instincts. Sarah knew something felt wrong about Dr. Thompson's methods, but she ignored those feelings because of her vulnerability and his manipulation. If something about your therapy feels inappropriate or uncomfortable, seek a second opinion immediately. Fifth, support your partner through mental health crises without judgment. My initial failure to create an environment where Sarah felt safe discussing her anxiety contributed to her seeking help elsewhere. Partners need to be allies in mental health recovery, not additional sources of shame or fear. Our experience with Dr. Thompson had impacts that extended far beyond our marriage. The licensing board investigation revealed that he had been operating unethically for years, victimizing numerous women who had sought help for legitimate mental health concerns. Detective Rodriguez told us that our case had opened the door for other victims to come forward. Sometimes it takes one brave couple to speak up before others feel safe sharing their experiences, he explained. Your willingness to pursue this case has likely prevented Dr. Thompson from victimizing many more women. The civil lawsuit and licensing investigation also led to policy changes at the professional association where Dr. Thompson had been a member. They implemented stricter oversight procedures, mandatory ethics training, and clearer guidelines for reporting suspected misconduct. Sarah's graduate school used her case as an example in their ethics training program, helping future therapists understand the importance of maintaining proper boundaries and the devastating impact that professional misconduct can have on patients and their families. It's painful to have our private trauma become a teaching tool, Sarah admitted, but if it helps prevent other therapists from crossing ethical lines, then I'm willing to share our story. Sarah's recovery from both her original panic disorder and the trauma of Dr. Thompson's manipulation was not linear or simple. There were setbacks and difficult days, but with proper treatment from Dr. Martinez, she gradually regained her mental health and sense of personal agency. The panic attacks became manageable through a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy, medication, and lifestyle changes. Sarah learned to recognize her triggers, implement coping strategies, and seek support when she needed it rather than suffering in silence. The difference between Dr. Martinez and Dr. Thompson is like night and day, Sarah told me during one of our conversations about her recovery. With Dr. Martinez, I feel empowered and educated about my condition. With Dr. Thompson, I felt dependent and confused. Dr. Martinez helped Sarah understand that her vulnerability to manipulation hadn't been a personal failing but rather a natural result of being in crisis while seeking help from someone in a position of authority. Predatory professionals specifically target people who are struggling because they're easier to control, Dr. Martinez explained. Sarah's trust in Dr. Thompson's credentials and expertise was normal and appropriate. His abuse of that trust was what was wrong. Sarah also had to work through complicated feelings about her own role in the situation. Even though she was the victim, she sometimes felt guilty about the deception and the impact it had on our marriage. I keep thinking about all the times I lied to you, she told me during one of our counseling sessions. Even though I thought I was protecting my therapy, I was still deceiving my husband. You were in an impossible situation, I reminded her. Dr. Thompson deliberately created circumstances where you felt you had to choose between your mental health and your marriage. That was part of his manipulation, making you believe that secrecy was necessary for your recovery. While Sarah was the primary victim of Dr. Thompson's abuse, I also had to work through my own emotional trauma from the experience. The months of suspicion, the pain of believing I was being betrayed, and the guilt I felt for not recognizing Sarah's mental health struggles had taken a significant toll on me as well. I attended individual counseling sessions with Dr. Martinez to process my own feelings about the situation. I had to work through anger toward Dr. Thompson, guilt about not being more supportive of Sarah initially, and fear about how to protect our relationship from future threats. It's normal to feel traumatized by this experience, Dr. Martinez told me. Your trust was violated, even though the primary violation was against Sarah. Secondary trauma from a partner's abuse is real and valid. I also had to confront some uncomfortable truths about our marriage dynamics. Sarah's fear of appearing weak or unstable to me had been based on real patterns in how I had responded to emotional situations in the past. While I had never intentionally made her feel judged, I had to acknowledge that my tendency to try to fix problems rather than simply listen and support had contributed to her reluctance to share her struggles with me. I want to be the kind of husband you can come to with anything, I told Sarah during one of our conversations. But I realize I need to change some of my own patterns to make that possible. The investigation into Dr. Thompson revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior that had been ongoing for nearly a decade. In addition to the 4 women who came forward during our case, investigators uncovered evidence of inappropriate relationships with at least 6 other former patients. Dr. Thompson's methods were particularly insidious because he used legitimate psychological concepts and terminology to justify his behavior. He would cite real research about anxiety treatment and trauma recovery, then twist those concepts to support his inappropriate interventions. He was sophisticated in his manipulation, Attorney Walsh explained during one of our case updates. He had enough legitimate knowledge about psychology to make his fake treatments sound plausible to patients who trusted his expertise. The state licensing board's final report on Dr. Thompson's case became a reference document for identifying and preventing similar abuse. It outlined the warning signs that patients should watch for and provided clear guidelines for appropriate therapeutic boundaries. Professional psychology organizations used the case to strengthen their ethics training requirements and improve reporting mechanisms for suspected misconduct. Dr. Thompson's former colleagues at his practice were required to undergo additional ethics training and submit to enhanced oversight. Cases like this are rare, but they cause immense damage when they occur, the licensing board chair said in a public statement. Our profession has a responsibility to protect vulnerable patients from predatory practitioners. As Sarah and I rebuilt our relationship, we created new traditions and practices designed to maintain open communication and mutual support. We instituted weekly check-ins where we specifically discussed our emotional well-being, any stresses we were facing, and how we could support each other better. We also established what we called vulnerability practice. Regular conversations where we shared fears, insecurities, or struggles without trying to fix each other's problems or offer immediate solutions. The goal was simply to create space for honesty and emotional intimacy. I never want either of us to feel like we have to handle major challenges alone, I told Sarah as we were developing these new practices. We're a team and teams work together through difficulties. Sarah suggested that we also create protocols for seeking professional help in the future. If either of us ever needed therapy, counseling, or medical treatment, we agreed to research providers together, share information about our treatment openly, and include each other in the process as appropriate. I never want to be in a position again where I'm hiding important aspects of my health or well-being from you, Sarah said. Even if I'm protecting my privacy in therapy, I want you to know that I'm in treatment and how it's going. Sarah's experience with Dr. Thompson fundamentally changed her career trajectory in positive ways. Instead of pursuing general clinical practice, she specialized in professional ethics, therapeutic boundaries, and recovery from professional abuse. She completed additional training in trauma-informed care and became certified in several evidence-based treatments for anxiety and PTSD. Her personal experience gave her unique insight into the psychological tactics that predatory therapists use and the recovery process that victims need. I understand what it feels like to be manipulated by someone you trust to help you, Sarah told me as she was preparing for her licensing examination. That experience makes me a better therapist because I can recognize the signs and help my clients process similar trauma. Sarah's first job after graduation was at a community mental health center that specifically served victims of various forms of abuse and trauma. She worked with women who had experienced everything from domestic violence to professional misconduct, helping them rebuild their sense of agency and learn to trust appropriate helpers again. She also began conducting training sessions for other mental health professionals about maintaining ethical boundaries and recognizing signs of colleague misconduct. Her presentations were always well received because she could speak from both professional knowledge and personal experience. Sarah has turned her trauma into a superpower, Dr. Martinez observed during one of our final couples counseling sessions. She's using her experience to protect other people and improve the profession. That's remarkable resilience. In a strange twist that took both of us years to fully understand, Sarah and I eventually came to feel grateful for the experience we had gone through, despite its traumatic nature. "I'm not grateful that Dr. Thompson abused me," Sarah clarified when she first mentioned this feeling. "But I'm grateful for what we learned about ourselves and our relationship through surviving it together." The crisis had forced us to develop much deeper levels of honesty, communication, and mutual support than we had ever achieved before. We learned to have difficult conversations, to support each other through emotional struggles, and to face challenges as a united team rather than as individuals trying to protect each other from our problems. "Before this happened, I thought we had a good marriage," I told Sarah on our 5th wedding anniversary about a year after the Dr. Thompson situation was resolved. "But now I realize we have a great marriage. We know we can get through anything together." Sarah had also discovered professional purpose and meaning that she might never have found otherwise. Her work helping other victims of professional abuse and educating mental health providers about ethical practice gave her a sense of mission that extended far beyond her personal recovery. "I wouldn't choose to go through it again," she said, "but I can see how it led me to exactly where I'm supposed to be in my life and career." Even years later, we remain vigilant about protecting our relationship and our individual mental health. We continue to attend periodic check-ins with Dr. Martinez, not because we're having problems, but because we want to maintain the communication skills we developed during our recovery. We also stay informed about issues related to professional ethics and patient protection in the mental health field. Sarah subscribes to professional publications and attends conferences focused on preventing professional misconduct, while I've become an advocate for stronger patient protection laws. Once you've experienced how easily professional trust can be violated, you never take it for granted again, Sarah explained to a group of therapy students during a guest lecture she gave. "That awareness makes me a more careful consumer of professional services and a more ethical provider." We've also maintained our practice of transparency about any professional help we might need. When I went through a period of work-related stress a year ago, I openly discussed my decision to see a counselor with Sarah, included her in researching potential providers, and kept her informed about my progress in treatment. The secrecy was what made the Dr. Thompson situation so damaging to our marriage, I explained to my own therapist. Transparency about getting help is part of how we protect our relationship now. Looking back on the entire experience 5 years later, Sarah and I can see how what initially appeared to be a devastating crisis actually became the foundation for a much stronger, healthier relationship than we had ever imagined possible. We learned skills and developed patterns of communication that have served us well through other challenges, job changes, family illnesses, financial stress, and the normal ups and downs of long-term marriage. We know how to support each other through difficult times without judgment, how to seek help appropriately when we need it, and how to maintain honesty even when the truth is uncomfortable. Sarah's career has flourished in ways that wouldn't have been possible without her personal experience with professional abuse. She's become a recognized expert in her field, published research papers on therapeutic ethics, and helped develop new standards for professional training and oversight. I've also grown personally and professionally from the experience. Learning to support Sarah through trauma and recovery taught me skills that have made me a better friend, family member, and colleague. I'm more attuned to signs that people around me might be struggling, and more skilled at offering appropriate support without trying to take over or fix everything. "We survived something that destroys many relationships," Sarah said during a recent conversation about our journey. "But more than surviving it, we grew from it. We're better people and better partners because of what we went through together." If someone had told me 6 years ago that my wife's apparent affair would ultimately strengthen our marriage and lead to positive changes in both our careers, I would have thought they were delusional. At the time, discovering Sarah's secret meetings with Dr. Thompson felt like the end of everything I valued and trusted. But sometimes the most painful experiences in life are also the most transformative. The crisis forced us to confront weaknesses in our communication, patterns of behavior that weren't serving us well, and assumptions about marriage and partnership that needed to be examined. Most importantly, it taught us that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice we make every day to support, protect, and prioritize each other. Real love means creating safety for your partner to be vulnerable, struggling through difficulties together rather than alone, and maintaining commitment even when circumstances are challenging and unclear. Today, Sarah is thriving in her career helping other people heal from trauma and abuse. Our marriage is characterized by deep trust, open communication, and genuine partnership. We've learned to navigate mental health challenges together, to seek help appropriately when we need it, and to maintain the kind of relationship where both partners can be completely honest about their struggles and fears. The woman I initially suspected of betraying me turned out to be a victim who needed my support and protection. The crisis that seemed like it would destroy us actually taught us how to love each other better. And the trauma that we both wished had never happened ultimately led us to exactly where we were meant to be, stronger individually and together than we had ever been before. Dr. Thompson caused immense pain and violated the trust of multiple vulnerable women seeking help. But his actions also inadvertently created an opportunity for Sarah and me to build something beautiful and resilient from the wreckage of our initial pain. We chose healing over bitterness, growth over stagnation, and togetherness over separation. That choice made all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story. If you had a similar experience, share it in the comments. And also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos.